Amit and Rohan Kapoor were two of Australia's richest brothers, living in a world of power and privilege, but when a young Indian maid named Anika entered their lives, their fortunes, desires, and darkest secrets collided in a deadly game of seduction and revenge. Anika stepped off the crowded flight from Mumbai, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. Melbourne was nothing like the bustling streets she had grown up in. The air felt cooler, the buildings taller, and the streets eerily quiet compared to the chaos she had left behind. She carried only a small suitcase and a handful of dreams, determined to make a life far from the hardships of her hometown. The job she had secured as a live-in maid at the mansion of the Kapoor brothers promised security and a chance to build a future, but she had no idea how deeply it would entangle her in a web of wealth, power, and dangerous secrets. The mansion loomed at the edge of the city, a sprawling estate surrounded by high walls and manicured gardens. It was an imposing structure, with marble floors that gleamed under the sunlight and chandeliers that sparkled in every room. As she stepped inside, Anika felt a shiver of awe and intimidation. The house was beautiful but cold, with an air of secrecy hanging in the hallways. Servants moved silently through corridors, and the atmosphere hinted that every corner held its own story, some hidden from the world outside. Meeting Amit and Rohan Kapoor was an overwhelming experience. Amit, the elder brother, carried himself with rigid composure, his eyes sharp and calculating. Rohan, in contrast, exuded a careless charm, laughing freely and moving with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Both brothers had an aura of power that made Anika feel small, yet strangely magnetic. She realized quickly that her new life would demand more than just cleaning and cooking. It required navigating the delicate balance of respect, discretion, and the subtle dynamics between two of the wealthiest men in Australia. As the sun set over the mansion, Anika stood in the grand hallway, unaware that this was only the beginning of a dangerous game that would consume her life entirely. The days at the Kapoor mansion passed with a strange rhythm, each one blending work, observation, and the careful navigation of the brothers' moods. Anika quickly learned the routines of the household, polishing silverware, organizing sprawling wardrobes, managing the schedules of an estate that seemed to run like a small kingdom. But it was not the chores that demanded her attention, it was the subtle glances, the lingering presence of the brothers, and the tension that seemed to vibrate through the air. Amit watched her with a controlled intensity, as if measuring every word and movement, while Rohan's gaze lingered with reckless curiosity, full of daring amusement. She was caught between their worlds, fascinated by the power they wielded and the attention she received. Anika began to realize that her charm carried weight. Her soft words and careful smiles could draw the brothers' focus, bending situations to her favor. Amit's admiration was restrained, a quiet storm brewing behind polite gestures, while Rohan's attention was fiery, unpredictable, and difficult to resist. It was a dangerous dynamic, one that Anika felt compelled to explore. She understood the rules of influence, the way a glance or a touch could ignite desire, and how those desires could blind even the most powerful men. She did not seek cruelty, she sought opportunity, a way to rise beyond the life she had always known. In secret, she began testing boundaries, small provocations to see how far she could push each brother's loyalty. The mansion, once merely a place of work, became a stage for a delicate game of manipulation and attraction. Anika's actions were deliberate, calculated, yet thrilling in their risk. She could sense the tension building, the unspoken battle between the brothers as each tried to claim her attention. It was intoxicating, and with every passing day, the line between fascination and danger grew thinner. Anika had entered a world where desire and ambition collided, and Anika's confidence grew with each passing week, and soon her presence in the Kapoor mansion was no longer just that of a maid, it was that of someone who could influence the lives of the two powerful brothers. She began to play a delicate game, carefully weaving herself into both Amit and Rohan's personal worlds. Amit's admiration was cautious but intense. He admired her cleverness, her ability to anticipate his needs, and the subtle way she carried herself. Rohan, on the other hand, was impulsive, giving in to his desires without thought, and Anika used his recklessness to her advantage. She learned when to push and when to withdraw, knowing that each action could spark desire or suspicion. With her growing influence, Anika began to manipulate the brothers to gain material benefits. Lavish gifts appeared on her bed, expensive clothes in her closet, and money transferred quietly to cover unexpected expenses. The mansion, which had once been intimidating and untouchable, now seemed to bend to her will. She thrived in the tension she created, carefully ensuring that neither brother knew the full extent of her attention to the other. The thrill of the double life became addictive. Each day was a careful balancing act. She laughed quietly at the chaos she caused, knowing that her game was secret, yet it was also a dangerous risk that could explode at any moment. The atmosphere in the mansion shifted as Anika's influence grew. The once stable household became filled with subtle rivalries and unspoken tension. Servants whispered about strange behaviors, doors closed just a moment too long, and eyes darted suspiciously down empty hallways. The brothers, each consumed by their own desire, began to notice the subtle cracks in their relationship, though neither suspected the full truth. Anika had entered a world of power and wealth, and she had discovered how dangerous and intoxicating it could be to play two billionaires against each other. As weeks turned into months, the delicate balance Anika had created began to show signs of strain. Small inconsistencies in her stories and movements started catching the brothers' attention. Amit noticed that certain items he had purchased mysteriously vanished, and Rohan realized that some of the gifts he had given her seemed to reappear in strange places. The careful web Anika had woven began to show its first signs of unraveling. Her once effortless charm now had to be backed by careful calculation to avoid suspicion. Amit, ever cautious and methodical, decided to take discreet action. He hired private investigators to observe Anika's movements outside the mansion and review any unusual transactions. Every step she took, every smile she offered, was being scrutinized in ways she could not anticipate. Rohan, guided more by instinct than strategy, felt unease settling deep in his chest. His impulsive nature made him less patient, and he began watching her closely, noting the moments when her attention seemed divided or her responses seemed rehearsed. Both brothers, unknowingly, were moving closer to the truth, but their rivalry kept them from confronting each other about it. Anika sensed the change in atmosphere immediately. The playful glances and flirtatious moments she had relied upon began to feel tense. She had underestimated the brothers' perceptiveness, and now she had to navigate more carefully. Every step became a test. A small misstep could expose her deception. She began planting distractions, little lies to divert attention and maintain her control. The mansion, once a place of opportunity, became a pressure cooker, filled with suspicion and quiet rivalry. Anika realized that the stakes had grown higher, and that her game of seduction and manipulation could spiral into danger if she lost control. The tension in the house was palpable, and every glance, every whispered word, carried the weight of secrets that could no longer stay hidden. The tension in the Kapoor mansion reached a breaking point when Rohan discovered the truth about Anika's double game. Hidden among her belongings, he found a message she had sent to Amit, revealing the depth of her manipulation. The shock hit him like a physical blow. He realized that the woman he had trusted, admired, and desired had been playing him all along. Rage and humiliation boiled inside him, but he did not act immediately. Instead, he observed her, letting his anger simmer while trying to determine the extent of her deception. Every movement, every word from Anika now carried a layer of suspicion. Anika, unaware that Rohan had uncovered her secret, continued her delicate act, carefully tending to the household duties while maintaining her charm. She had believed herself untouchable, thinking her manipulation was subtle enough to escape notice. But the first cracks in her carefully constructed facade were beginning to appear. Small changes in Rohan's behavior, sharp looks, moments of withdrawal, and unexplained tension, were signs she could not ignore. She felt a flicker of fear, the first real sensation that her game might be unraveling. The atmosphere in the mansion became electric with unspoken threats. Amit, still unaware of Rohan's discovery, continued his quiet observations, while Rohan began leaving subtle warnings around the house. Broken objects, cryptic notes, and lingering glares served as a silent message to Anika. Her control was slipping. She realized that she could no longer manipulate without risk. Every decision now carried potential consequences, and one wrong move could expose her completely. The first betrayal had been revealed, and the stakes had risen dramatically. Anika's life, once a thrilling game of power and desire, was now a dangerous tightrope walk. Every glance, every whispered footstep, held the potential to ignite fury. The house, once a place of opportunity, had become a cage of suspicion, where one mistake could cost her Ev. When firefighters finally managed to break through the collapsing doors and smoke-filled hallways, the scale of the disaster became clear. The flames had spread through the oldest parts of the palace with frightening speed, feeding on years-old wooden beams, drapes, and stored materials. Entire sections of the building were reduced to blackened ruins before emergency teams could reach them. Guests who had been celebrating only moments earlier were now coughing outside, covered in ash, some crying, some searching desperately for missing family members. The once grand palace courtyard had turned into a place of panic, confusion, and grief. As the fire crews pushed deeper inside, they began discovering bodies in different corners of the burned wing. 14 people in total had lost their lives, including 2 decorators who had been preparing items for the next ceremony, a young receptionist from the palace staff, Kieran's close friend Liam who had gone exploring the old hallway out of curiosity, several elderly relatives unable to move quickly, and Margot's sister who had stepped away from the main event to rest in a quieter area. Their deaths formed a tragic pattern that showed how quickly the smoke and flames had overwhelmed anyone trapped inside. The police secured the area and began questioning witnesses. Many recalled smelling something unusual earlier or hearing a faint noise from the storage wing but had dismissed it amid the celebration. Investigators soon found burn patterns that didn't match an accidental fire. A melted metal canister containing traces of an accelerant lay near the remains of the storage shelves. This single discovery changed the entire direction of the investigation. The fire had not simply started, it had been created. As the news spread among guests, shock turned into uneasy suspicion. Families demanded answers, and whispers filled the courtyard as people wondered who would cause such destruction on a night meant for joy. The wedding ha. After the garden incident, Anika realized that the stakes had grown dangerously high. Fear and exhilaration intertwined as she carefully recalibrated her strategy. She knew that both brothers were now aware, at least partially, of her manipulations, and that any misstep could lead to disaster. Instead of retreating, she chose to escalate her game, playing on the fragile rivalry between Amit and Rohan. Her movements became calculated, each gesture designed to provoke subtle reactions, to keep both men vying for her attention while never fully trusting one another. She began offering quiet reassurances to Amit, presenting herself as loyal and devoted, while simultaneously reigniting Rohan's impulsive desire. Every interaction was a test, a dance on the edge of discovery. Anika found herself navigating conversations, glances, and even the placement of objects in the house to manipulate perceptions. Servants noticed the strange patterns, the way she lingered in certain rooms, the moments when she seemed to vanish only to appear in another part of the mansion unexpectedly. Rumors whispered through the staff, and even the brothers' closest confidants began sensing the growing tension. The mansion itself seemed to respond to the shifting dynamics. Long hallways and empty rooms became silent witnesses to the intricate game she played. Doors closed quietly behind her, shadows stretched unnaturally in the moonlight, and the air always carried a weight of anticipation. Anika was aware that the line between seduction and danger had narrowed. Every smile, every carefully timed pause, was a weapon. The tension between Amit and Rohan intensified, feeding the subtle chaos she had orchestrated. She had transformed the household into a theater of desire and distrust, with herself at the center, knowing that the slightest miscalculation could ignite a chain reaction of violence, betrayal, and irreversible consequences. The mansion, once merely a place of work, had become a living tragedy. Anika knew that time was running out. Both brothers had begun seeing through her carefully constructed facade, and the mansion was thick with suspicion and silent tension. Determined to regain control, she devised a final plan, one that would draw Amit and Rohan together under the guise of reconciliation. She crafted a scenario in which she could manipulate their emotions, exploit their rivalry, and attempt to assert dominance one last time. The plan was risky, but she believed she could navigate the danger with her usual charm and cunning. Late one evening, she lured both brothers to a secluded part of the mansion, a dimly lit room rarely used except for storage. The shadows in the corners seemed to heighten the sense of unease. Amit arrived first, his expression controlled yet wary, while Rohan's arrival was charged with barely contained anger and suspicion. The air between them was electric, a mixture of rivalry, desire, and fear. Anika moved with calculated grace, drawing their attention, redirecting their focus, and stoking the simmering tension between them. She believed she could manage the confrontation, maintaining her grip on both men and keeping her secret safe, but the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Words were unnecessary, the tension alone was explosive. Amit's controlled composure clashed with Rohan's impulsive fury, each brother responding to the other and to Anika's presence with escalating intensity. In the chaos, a heavy ornament on a nearby table became an unintended weapon. Amit, in a frantic attempt to restrain Rohan, struck him accidentally. Rohan fell to the floor, blood spreading rapidly across the polished marble. Shock and panic rippled through the room. Anika stood frozen, the weight of what had happened sinking in. Her final plan had failed, and the consequences were far deadlier than she could have imagined. The mansion, once a playground for manipulation, had become a scene of violence and irreversible tragedy, marking the Rohan's patience, long tested by Anika's manipulations, finally snapped when he uncovered concrete evidence of her deceit. Hidden among her belongings, he found financial records showing secret transfers and lavish purchases he had never authorized. His anger and humiliation were immediate and consuming. For weeks, he had sensed that he was being played, but the undeniable proof made the betrayal personal and intense. He realized that Anika had been exploiting both brothers, using their desires to gain wealth and control. The revelation fueled a burning need for confrontation and revenge. Instead of acting impulsively, Rohan began planning carefully. He watched her every move, noting the subtle ways she shifted her attention between him and Amit. He intended to confront her, to expose her and reclaim control, but Amit's presence complicated matters. The elder brother's calm but piercing gaze suggested he might already suspect the truth. Rohan knew that a direct confrontation could spark a catastrophic clash between the siblings, and he had to be strategic. He began gathering evidence discreetly, documenting her actions to ensure that when the time came, there would be no room for denial. Anika, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly reckless. Her confidence in her manipulations had blinded her to the depth of the brothers' suspicions. She continued to play them against each other, offering assurances to Amit while reigniting Rohan's attention. Yet, the subtle changes in their behavior did not escape her notice. She sensed that her control was slipping, that the careful game she had perfected was now fraying at the edges. The mansion, once her playground, had become a pressure cooker of tension, suspicion, and silent threats. Every glance carried weight, every interaction teetered on the brink of exposure. Anika knew that the game was approaching a turning point, and that the coming days could determine who would emerge victorious. Anika disappeared the very next day, vanishing as suddenly as she had entered the Kapoor mansion. One moment she had been there, standing in the aftermath of the violent confrontation, and the next, she was gone. The brothers, shaken and terrified by what had transpired, scrambled to cover the evidence of the night's chaos. Amit and Rohan worked in tense silence, staging the scene to appear accidental, careful to remove any trace of Anika's manipulation or her involvement in the events that had led to Rohan's injury. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and control, had transformed into a carefully constructed facade hiding chaos and betrayal. Authorities were called when the neighbors reported strange disturbances, but the brothers' story was carefully crafted. Conflicting testimonies, selective truths, and the lack of any concrete evidence left investigators with more questions than answers. The media picked up fragments of the story, painting a tantalizing picture of scandal, a young Indian maid, two billionaire brothers, and a shocking incident of violence. Rumors spread quickly, social media buzzing with speculation, yet no one could confirm Anika's fate. Her disappearance only intensified the intrigue, making her seem almost mythical, a ghost who had vanished after leaving destruction in her wake. Inside the mansion, the tension remained palpable. Amit and Rohan avoided one another, each haunted by fear, guilt, and the realization that their lives had been irreversibly altered. Servants whispered about what had really happened, yet no one dared speak openly. The house felt emptier, colder, as if it too were mourning the chaos unleashed within its walls. Anika's vanishing act had ensured that no one could fully grasp her power or her influence. She had left behind not just a scene of blood and betrayal, but a trail of mystery that would linger long after her absence, leaving the brothers to face the consequences of their desires and obsessions alone. The story reached its bitter conclusion as the aftermath of Anika's manipulations continued to unfold. The Kapoor brothers, once untouchable figures of wealth and influence, found their lives unraveling under the weight of scandal, suspicion, and legal scrutiny. Their empire, carefully built over decades, began to show cracks. Business partners grew wary, investments faltered, and the media relentlessly dissected every rumor and speculation about the events in the mansion. The brothers' rivalry, once a private tension, had spilled into the public eye, exposing vulnerabilities that Anika had exploited with terrifying precision. Meanwhile, Anika remained nowhere to be found. Investigators and private trackers scoured records and locations, but she had vanished completely, leaving no trail. Rumors suggested she had returned to India, while others claimed she was traveling internationally, continuing her life far from the chaos she had left behind. Her disappearance only added to her mystique. She became a ghost story whispered about in Melbourne and beyond, a cautionary tale of charm and cunning outmatching wealth and power. Her ability to manipulate two of Australia's richest men and vanish without a trace cemented her legend, making her both feared and admired in the darkest corners of society. The mansion, once a sanctuary of opulence, stood empty at night, echoing with memories of betrayal, desire, and violence. The brothers, scarred by the events, were forced to confront the consequences of obsession and unchecked desire. Anika's revenge, though carried out silently, had left permanent marks, emotional, financial, and reputational. What began as a game of seduction and control had ended in a bloody lesson about power, greed, and human vulnerability. The story of Anika and the Kapoor brothers became a chilling reminder that even the wealthiest and most powerful could be undone by someone underestimated, leaving behind a legacy of chaos, fear, and unanswered questions.